The hall was too hot again. Heat gathered beneath the high, sloping ceiling of the Great Pyramid, thick as a cloak around Daenerys Targaryen's shoulders. The torches spat and guttered, their smoke crawling up the carved walls to stain the stone dragons blacker than they had ever been in any Valyrian imagination. Sweat gleamed on the brow of the supplicant kneeling below her, and on the polished helms of the Unsullied, and on Tyrion Lannister's pale, clever face as he shifted his weight, wine lingering on his breath. Justice. The man on his knees pleaded in a harsh Meereenese accent, forehead pressed to the marble. They took my daughter, your worship. Gold cloaks of the old masters, in secret. The sons of the Harpy still live. They skulk, Tyrion murmured under his breath. Living would imply spine. Daenerys heard him and did not smile. The man's words were a thin echo of 100 such complaints. Some nights it seemed all of Meereen lined up to pour its wounds at her feet. Debts unpaid, daughters stolen, sons gone to shadows, chains broken only to be replaced by new, subtler chains of coin and fear. Her dragon stirred restlessly somewhere above, a low, distant rumble that she felt in her bones. "Grey worm," she said. The commander stepped forward with that soundless precision that always made her think of blades sliding from sheaths. "Your Grace, take the names this man gives and find his daughter if you can. If these men are harpies, I want them dragged into the light. If he lies, he will answer for it." Grey Worm bowed. "It will be done." The petitioner sobbed thanks. They always did, as if a promise could mend the world. When he had been led away, the next case was brought forward, another knot in the endless tangle that was Meereen. Tyrion coughed softly. "You are tired, your Grace," he said when there was a brief lull, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "You do not need to prove yourself more patient than the mother herself. Leave some petitions for tomorrow. The people will not love you less if their turn comes with the dawn instead of dusk." "The people have waited generations," Daenerys said. "They can wait a night, you mean? Just as Westeros has waited a lifetime for a queen and can wait another year." Her eyes flicked to him. "I am tired of waiting." Tyrion spread small, elegant hands. "I only counsel that a queen's strength is not measured in hours spent listening to liars and half-truths." Missandei cleared her throat softly. "Your Grace, there is a matter that may require your attention at once." Her dark eyes were steady, but there was a tightness around her mouth that Daenerys had learned to read as worry. "Another matter?" Daenerys asked. "Is Meereen on fire again?" "Not Meereen," Missandei said. "A ship. It limped into the eastern harbor at dusk. The harbor master says its hull is scorched black, its sails half-burned. The captain claims he sailed too close to the smoking sea and saw something." Tyrion's eyes sharpened. "Sailors see a great many things, most of which do not exist. The harbor master sent a runner," Missandei continued. "He thought you would wish to hear what the man says he saw. He speaks of dragons, your Grace, and of silver-haired lords amid the ruins of Valyria." For a moment the hall seemed to tilt. The torches hissed louder, or perhaps that was her blood in her ears. Valyria. She had seen it once in a vision, a city of pale towers and molten rivers, roaring as it died. Her brother's voice whispered unbidden in memory. "Our forebears ruled the world from there, little sister. It was our birthright. Bring him to me," Daenerys said. Tyrion lifted one brow. In here," she said. "If he lies, he will lie no less in the harbor. And if he speaks truth." "If he speaks truth," Tyrion finished softly. "The world is not as we have been told it is." The man looked as if the sea had tried to swallow him and spat him back out in disgust. Salt had crusted in the cracks of his sunburned skin, and his hair hung in filthy ropes, stiff with dried brine. His ship rocked gently in the harbor's quiet swell, its timbers blackened from stern to bow as though some giant had run a torch along its sides. The stink of smoke and salt and old fear clung to the vessel and the men upon it. He stared at Daenerys when they brought him ashore, eyes red-rimmed and wild. For a heartbeat she saw recognition there, or something close to it. a flicker that said he knew the sight of silver hair and purple eyes meant power. "Your Grace," Jorah Mormont murmured beside her, his rough hand resting carefully on the pommel of his sword. "If this is some tale spun to win gold, I will hear it and know," Daenerys said. She had learned to read lies in the quiver of a mouth, the dart of eyes, the way a man's hands fidgeted when gold was near. Lies were easy, truth was harder. The sailor knelt, unsteady, when Grey Worm pushed him down. "You stand before Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen," Grey Worm said flatly. "First of her name, Queen of Meereen. Speak true or lose your tongue." "I am Garran of Volantis," the man croaked, and his voice sounded as though it had been dragged over broken coral. "Captain of the Stormdancer. I did not seek your city, your grace. The sea drove me here. The sea and other things." His gaze flitted up again, unable not to. Drogon was only a dark shape against the reddening sky, distant, but his roar rolled over the harbor from time to time, a low thunder that made even hardened dockmen flinch. Rhaegal and Viserion wheeled further out, their pale wings catching the dying light. "You sailed too close to the smoking sea?" Tyrion asked, coming down the pier with a goblet in hand as if attending a garden party rather than a charred wreck. "That alone would make you an idiot or a liar." Garran's lips cracked in a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I had no wish to go there, my lord. Storms pressed us from the north, corsairs from the south. The winds turned strange. We lost 2 masts in a single night. I thought we would die, all of us. But then the fog came and the world went quiet." Daenerys watched him. His hands shook as he spoke, not like a man begging for coin, but like one who cannot keep the memory from his flesh. "You saw Valyria," she said. Garran swallowed. "We saw something. Black water that hissed like sand on a forge, rocks that steamed, islands that moved, ruins like teeth, for miles pale and broken." The men muttered prayers. "I would have turned us away, but the currents had their hold on us. The fog parted, and they were there." "Who?" Daenerys asked, though she knew the answer he was about to give. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, sharp as a drawn sword. "Dragonlords." Garran's voice broke on the word. "They rode beasts like yours, great winged shadows that fell from the clouds. And atop a black cliff I saw a hall of white stone still standing amid all that ruin. Light burning in its windows. Men and women upon the parapets with hair like your own, your grace, pale as moonlight. They looked down upon us and one of them raised a hand and fire came." He gestured helplessly at his ship. "A good story," Tyrion said, sipping wine. "You should sell it to a Braavosi poet. They pay well for such things. As for the burns, any pirate with a jar of wildfire could." Garran fumbled at his belt. Grey Worm stiffened, hand going to spear, but the man only drew out a dagger wrapped in ragged cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, as if afraid it might bite him. The blade that emerged was long and narrow, a leaf of smoky, rippling gray metal that drank the light rather than reflected it. The hilt was dragonbone, carved into 3 interlocked heads whose jaws met at the pommel, their eyes small chips of red glass. On the crossguard was etched a sigil Daenerys had seen all her life, a 3-headed dragon, wings spread. But the style was wrong. The dragon's heads were longer, more sinuous, the lines older, more stylized, as if someone had drawn her house's arms from memory centuries before Aegon's banner ever flew over Dragonstone. "I took it from the man on the cliff," Garran whispered. "He hurled fire at us, but the sea lurched and the flames missed. We scraped along the rocks, and the Stormdancer's prow struck the cliff. We were close enough that I could see his eyes, pale as ice, and he mine. I don't know why I jumped. I remember the stone beneath my fingers, and his hand reaching for me, and then," he shuddered, "smoke, screaming. When I woke, this was at my side and his body was gone. The cliff too. All gone, as if the sea had swallowed it." Daenerys reached for the dagger. Her hand shook, to her shame, but the smoking harbor and the murmurs of dockmen fell away when her fingers brushed the Valyrian steel. The metal was cool, far too cool for a blade that had lain against a sun-warmed belt. She felt something coil up her arm, a whisper at the edges of hearing, a wordless sense of recognition. Blood of the dragon, something seemed to sigh. They brought Garran into the cool gloom of the audience chamber, away from the smells of tar and fish and burned wood. The room was lined with carved pillars rising like petrified trees toward the arched ceiling, each wrapped with scenes of dragons and chained figures that some triumphant Meereenese architect had thought appropriate once. Daenerys had thought of having them chipped away, but there were always more urgent evils than stone. Now those stone dragons seemed to lean closer as she studied the dagger upon a low table of lacquered cedar. "It could be a forgery," Tyrion said, though his tone had lost some of its easy scorn. His eyes were fixed on the blade and did not quite want to look away. "Old Valyria has been gone longer than the free cities have stood. Men have had centuries to imagine what its toys might have looked like." "The metal is true," Yora said quietly. "That is Valyrian steel if ever I saw it. I had my father's sword in my hand once. Longclaw. The feel of it was like this." He reached, then stopped with his fingertips just shy of the hilt, as if touching it might be treason. Garran sat slumped on a bench between two unsullied, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. A cup of watered wine remained untouched at his side. He flinched when Drogon's roar rolled faintly through the stone above them, and his gaze darted to Daenerys as if he expected her to take wing and burn him where he sat. "Where did you come by this, exactly?" she asked, though he had told the story once already. She wanted to hear it again, to weigh each word. He licked dry lips. "As I said, Your Grace. The cliff, the hall, the man in black and red upon it with hair like yours. He wore a collar of gold in the shape of a serpent biting its tail. When he raised his hand, the sky burned. His hands rose involuntarily, as if to ward off remembered flame. I saw the dagger at his belt when we scraped along the rock. I think he tried to grab hold of me as the stone collapsed. I don't know if he meant to kill me or save me, or pull you under with him," Tyrion suggested. Daenerys picked up the dagger again. It lay in her palm with deceptive lightness. Up close she could see that the three dragon heads on the hilt differed slightly from one another. One sleek and narrow, one heavy-jawed, one with a cruel, hooked snout. Rhaegal, Viserion, and Drogon, she thought absurdly, though the dagger was surely older than their eggs had been. The sigil on the crossguard disturbed her most. It was her father's banner, her brother's obsession, the badge that had driven Viserys half-mad with hunger. Yet the lines carried a strangeness that whispered of a time before there was a House Targaryen to speak of, before Aegon ever looked west. "Missandei," she said, "can you read these runes?" Her handmaiden stepped closer, delicate as a bird. Her fingers hovered above the etched words that circled the base of the blade. "Some," she said, frowning. "They are in High Valyrian, but in a script older than any I saw in Astapor. This word is blood. This one, flame. And this is remembrance or remembering. Here, those who were not taken, or perhaps those who will not be taken. The form is ambiguous." "Comforting," Tyrion said. "Either they escaped the doom or they refuse to die now. I'm not sure which is worse." Yora shifted. "Your Grace," he began. "Even if this is what it appears to be, it proves only that some remnant of Valyria's wealth remains in the ruins. A lost armory, perhaps. Bandits. Treasure hunters. Men will risk anything for steel like that. It need not mean that dragonlords live again." "But he saw them," Daenerys said softly. "He saw riders on dragons." Garran's head jerked up. "I did, Your Grace. On my eyes and blood, I swear it. Not beasts like yours, nor like yours alone. There were others, smaller, with blue scales that shimmered like ice. One that was red as fresh spilled blood. The one whose rider hurled fire at us was pale as ash, with wings that caught the light like beaten silver." He shivered. His dragon screamed like a furnace given breath. "There are no more dragons," Yora said, almost automatically. "Beyond yours." "And yet," Tyrion murmured. Daenerys let their words wash over her. Her mind had flown away, unmoored, to places she had never walked. A hall of pale stone under a violet sky. A great window opening onto a churning sea of smoke. A man with hair white as bone turning as if he had heard her. His eyes meeting hers across an impossible distance. Daenerys jerked back, heart hammering. The vision was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving only the terrace, the dragon, the heat. "Dreams," she whispered. "It's only dreams. I have had enough of prophecies and visions." And yet she did not throw the dagger away. Instead, she slid it into a leather sheath she had found in her own chest. One meant for some courtly ornament, a piece she had never worn. The hilt's 3 dragon heads peered over the edge like watchful sentries. "Guard me then," she told the blade quietly. "If you are of my blood, help me see the truth of what remains." Drogon rumbled again as if in answer. When she rested her hand on his warm, scaled neck, a strange calm settled over her. Whatever waited in those western mists, she would not face it alone. The room the Red Priests had claimed within the pyramid was windowless and close, its walls hung with heavy woven cloth to keep out drafts. The only light came from the great iron brazier that squatted in the center like some squat metal idol. Its flames licked high and strange. Not the ordinary orange of cookfires, but shifting shades of yellow, green, and ghostly white, as if some unseen hand were stirring colors through it. Kinvara stood on the far side of the brazier, her scarlet robes pooling around her like spilled wine. Her eyes reflected the fire as she regarded Daenerys, and in their depths she seemed very nearly amused. "You bring me a blade drenched in old power and ask for small answers," she said in the smooth, accented common tongue she wore like another garment. "Names, faces, places on a map." "I ask for truth," Daenerys replied. The dagger lay on a flat stone between them, the runes on its base dark and dull in the flickering light. "A sailor claims he has seen dragonlords in the ruins of Valyria. If that is so, they may be kin to me, or enemies, or both. I would know which." "All kin are both in time," Kinvara murmured, her lips curved. "Fire is not so easily tamed, even when it flows in the veins." Tyrion shifted against the wall, the shadow of his cup long and thin on the floor. "If all this is nonsense, I would very much like to know sooner rather than later," he said. "Plans have been made based on the assumption that Her Grace possesses the only 3 dragons in existence." "You speak as if plans meant anything to the Lord of Light," the Red Priestess replied without turning to look at him. "He burns what he must to bring the world to its destined end." "Comforting," Tyrion muttered. Kinvara extended both hands over the brazier. Her long fingers traced patterns in the rising heat, and the flames leapt higher as if eager to touch her. She began to speak in High Valyrian, but the cadences were older than any Daenerys had heard in Astapor or Meereen. The words moved like molten metal, thick and slow. Daenerys understood only fragments. Blood, doom, dawn and dusk, a road of ash. The priestess's eyes slid shut. The fire changed. It did not turn red, as when Melisandre had spoken of kings in the north, nor gold, as when lesser priests ranted of Rhaegal's glory. Instead, the heart of the brazier went strange and colorless, a sooty white like old bone. Shapes began to form in it, as if someone were drawing lines in the gloom with a charcoal stick. Daenerys stepped closer despite herself. Heat kissed her face, nearly unbearable, but she did not flinch. She saw towers, pale and slender, rising from a sea that boiled. Bridges like ribbons of stone arching over chasms where smoke coiled and writhed. Below, rivers of molten rock glowed orange and white, flowing through channels carved into the earth, some vanishing into dark tunnels, others spilling out into vast smoking basins where men and women guided the lava's heat with gestures and glowing rods. The terrace was cooler than the hall, but not by much. Heat rose from Meereen's streets in slow, shimmering waves, carrying with it the smells of cookfires, dung, spiced meats, and sweat. Far below, the city lay in a patchwork of lanterns and shadows, a patient beast resting at last after a day of gnawing on its own tail. Drogon crouched along the parapet like a stretch of night given horn and wing. His eyes were twin embers watching her as she stepped out into the wind. He rumbled low in his chest, a sound somewhere between a growl and a question. "You smell it too," Daenerys said quietly. "The steel, the sea, the fire." She held the dagger up. Starlight slid along its rippling surface and vanished into the smoky gray. The blade seemed darker out here, the runes along its base faintly iridescent when she turned it this way and that. Rhaegal and Viserion wheeled further out, their pale shapes ghosting across the face of the moon before vanishing into cloud. They had grown, all three of them. They were no longer the fragile, skeletal things that had clung to her shoulders in Karth. When Drogon spread his wings now, the wind on the terrace changed direction. Daenerys leaned her elbows on the warm stone of the parapet and looked west, toward where the narrow sea and, far beyond, the smoking sea lay. She had never seen that infamous expanse, but sailors brought tales of it to every port. Black waters under a blacker sky, boiling with unseen vents, steam rising like ghosts. Some swore that the doom still roared there, a storm that never ended. "Once there was a city there," she murmured to herself. 100 cities, towers that scraped the sky, rivers of molten stone, dragons as numerous as the stars. Viserys' voice came back to her, sharp and hungry and so sure. "We will return one day, the rightful blood, and all the free cities will tremble. The doom could not keep us from our birthright." Yet her brother had died with molten gold upon his head in a slaver's palace far from home, and she had hatched her dragons in a wasteland that had never known Valyria's shadow. What did he know? The wind tugged strands of her hair across her face. She closed her eyes and, for a moment, let herself imagine it. She upon Drogon's back, flying not over parched red wastes but over a sea of smoke, toward white towers rising defiantly above ruin. Other dragons in the sky, turning to look at her. Other riders, their hair silver, their eyes amethyst or pale blue. Kin, perhaps, or enemies. The thought made her skin prickle. Was this what she had sought all her life without knowing it? Not the iron throne of Westeros, not a cold chair made of other men's swords, but the place where her blood began? Or was that another lie Viserys had left in her bones? "You were born in a storm," she whispered. "Not in Valyria, on Dragonstone. You are of Westeros as much as Essos. What claim do you truly have to a city that died before your grandfather's grandfather ever drew breath?" Drogon shifted, his scales rasping softly against the stone. He stretched his neck and huffed hot air over her shoulder, the smell of char and meat heavy in it. The dagger felt heavier all at once. Daenerys looked down at it. In the shadow of Drogon's head, the runes seemed to flicker like banked coals. When she brushed them with her thumb, a whisper curled up from the metal again, just beyond hearing. Not words exactly, but something like a pulse, a memory trapped in steel, blood, flame, those who were not taken. She saw, for a heartbeat, a hall of pale stone under a violet sky, a great window opening onto a churning sea of smoke. A man with hair white as bone turning as if he had heard her, his eyes meeting hers across an impossible distance. Daenerys jerked back, heart hammering. The vision was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving only the terrace, the dragon, the heat. "Dreams," she whispered. "It's only dreams. I have had enough of prophecies and visions." And yet she did not throw the dagger away. Instead, she slid it into a leather sheath she had found in her own chest, one meant for some courtly ornament, a piece she had never worn. The hilt's 3 dragon heads peered over the edge like watchful sentries. "Guard me then," she told the blade quietly. "If you are of my blood, help me see the truth of what remains." Drogon rumbled again as if in answer. When she rested her hand on his warm, scaled neck, a strange calm settled over her. Whatever waited in those western mists, she would not face it alone. The room the Red Priests had claimed within the pyramid was windowless and close, its walls hung with heavy woven cloth to keep out drafts. The only light came from the great iron brazier that squatted in the center like some squat metal idol. Its flames licked high and strange. Not the ordinary orange of cookfires, but shifting shades of yellow, green, and ghostly white, as if some unseen hand were stirring colors through it. Kinvara stood on the far side of the brazier, her scarlet robes pooling around her like spilled wine. Her eyes reflected the fire as she regarded Daenerys, and in their depths she seemed very nearly amused. "You bring me a blade drenched in old power and ask for small answers," she said in the smooth, accented common tongue she wore like another garment. "Names, faces, places on a map. I ask for truth," Daenerys replied. The dagger lay on a flat stone between them, the runes on its base dark and dull in the flickering light. "A sailor claims he has seen dragonlords in the ruins of Valyria. If that is so, they may be kin to me, or enemies, or both. I would know which." "All kin are both in time," Kinvara murmured, her lips curved. "Fire is not so easily tamed, even when it flows in the veins." Tyrion shifted against the wall, the shadow of his cup long and thin on the floor. "If all this is nonsense, I would very much like to know sooner rather than later," he said. "Plans have been made based on the assumption that Her Grace possesses the only 3 dragons in existence." "You speak as if plans meant anything to the Lord of Light," the Red Priestess replied without turning to look at him. "He burns what he must to bring the world to its destined end." "Comforting," Tyrion muttered. Kinvara extended both hands over the brazier. Her long fingers traced patterns in the rising heat, and the flames leapt higher as if eager to touch her. She began to speak in High Valyrian, but the cadences were older than any Daenerys had heard in Astapor or Meereen. The words moved like molten metal, thick and slow. Daenerys understood only fragments. Blood, doom, dawn and dusk, a road of ash. The priestess's eyes slid shut. The fire changed. It did not turn red, as when Melisandre had spoken of kings in the north, nor gold, as when lesser priests ranted of Rhaegal's glory. Instead, the heart of the brazier went strange and colorless, a sooty white like old bone. Shapes began to form in it, as if someone were drawing lines in the gloom with a charcoal stick. Daenerys stepped closer despite herself. Heat kissed her face, nearly unbearable, but she did not flinch. She saw towers, pale and slender, rising from a sea that boiled. Bridges like ribbons of stone arching over chasms where smoke coiled and writhed. Below, rivers of molten rock glowed orange and white, flowing through channels carved into the earth, some vanishing into dark tunnels, others spilling out into vast smoking basins where men and women guided the lava's heat with gestures and glowing rods. On a high cliff, a hall of white stone shone like a tooth in a wrought black mouth. Figures stood upon its balcony, their robes snapping in a wind that did not trouble the smoke. Their hair gleamed silver. One raised a hand, and dragonfire fell from the sky as easily as rain. Kinvara's voice deepened. "There were those who burned and those who did not," she intoned. "Those who trusted in stone and those who trusted in flame. The doom came for both, but not all were taken. Some clung to their pride atop pillars of rock and prayed to the dragons beneath the earth." The fire listened. It is listening still. "Are they alive?" Daenerys demanded. "Now? Not in the doom's memory. Now, do they rule there, these remnants?" Tyrion raised a brow at her sudden ferocity. Kinvara's lips curved, just a little. "The fire shows me a light that has not gone out," the priestess said. "A beating heart in a corpse's chest, palaces still standing amid ruins, forges still burning in caves of glass. Men and women with the blood of the dragon walking paths that no ship can reach unless the fire wills it." "So yes," Tyrion said, "or perhaps dressed in prettier words." Kinvara ignored him, her gaze fixed on Daenerys, sharp and intent. "I see you as well, Daenerys Stormborn," she said. You stand upon a narrow bridge over a sea of smoke, with dragons at your back and dead cities before you. Behind you, chains fall away like rain. Before you, a door of obsidian stands closed. The fire waits to see which way you will turn. Daenerys did not like the feel of that. If they live, she said, these dragonlords, what do they want? The same thing all your kind has ever wanted, Kinvara said gently. Dominion. Fire has no purpose but to consume. The question, my queen, is not what they desire, but what you will do when their desire meets yours. Will you join their feast or quench it? The flames shuddered, then collapsed inward. In a breath, they were only ordinary fire again, orange and yellow and red. The strange white heat vanished as if it had never been. Daenerys stood very still. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath her dress. The dagger lay on the stone, its runes dark. For a moment she thought she saw smoke curl from them, but when she blinked it was gone. The council chamber smelled of wax and parchment and men who had been arguing too long. Candles guttered in their iron sconces, dripping pale rivers onto the stone. Maps lay unfurled across the table, weights holding down their curling edges. Carved stones from the Skahazaden, a bronze idol from an old Meereenese temple, and now the Valyrian steel dagger, its dragonbone hilt gleaming dully. We cannot even reach the smoking sea without risking everything, Yora was saying. Those waters are treacherous. Half the tales of ships that vanish in the world begin there. You would sail the queen and her dragons into that. I would sail anywhere her grace commands, Dario Naharis drawled from where he lounged, his boots on a stool, twin rocks resting against his chair. Besides, think of the plunder. If even a tenth of the old tales of Valyria's riches are true, we are not talking about plunder, Tyrion snapped. We are talking about marching into a graveyard that may or may not be walking. You heard Kinvara. Fire has its own plans, and so, I suspect, do any dragonlords who survived the doom. Perhaps they will welcome their queen, Dario said lightly, flashing Daenerys a grin. Silver hair, dragons, a taste for burning her enemies. You have much in common. We do not know that they are her kin, Yora insisted. Their blood may have nothing to do with House Targaryen. Valyria held many dragonlord families. The Valerians, the Celtigars, the Bellarese, the Whores, Tyrion finished. Yes, I read books too, Ser Yora, assuming the lists we have are even complete. Half the great families may have been wiped out long before the doom, and we would never know. Daenerys listened to them, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Missandei sat quiet at her right hand, eyes moving from face to face with that careful attentiveness that missed nothing. Grey Worm stood near the door, silent and solid. We speak as if they are not there, Daenerys said at last. Her voice sliced cleanly through the tangle of theirs. As if they are phantoms, or shadows in a priestess's fire. I have held their steel in my hand. I have seen their hall in the flames. I have heard a man half mad with fear speak of their dragons. They exist. And if they do? Tyrion asked. If they sit atop their smoking cliffs and watch the world, safe behind spells and storms, what then? Do you expect them to bend the knee? To hail you as their lost queen? I expect nothing, she said. But I will not let them remain unseen. If dragonlords live in Valyria still, they are a fire waiting to spread. I am trying to build a new world here, one without chains. How can I do that while ignoring the oldest chain of all, rattling beneath the smoking sea? Silence fell for a moment. The candles hissed. You have not yet secured Meereen, Yora said quietly. Nor Astapor, nor Yunkai. Your hold on Slaver's Bay is still fragile. The sons of the Harpy wait in every shadow. To chase ghosts now. Ghosts that breathe fire, Dario said. I like these ghosts. To your own side. If this enclave truly survived the doom by sorcery, we can safely assume they are not fools. They will have had centuries to fortify whatever rocks they clung to. We would be sailing into their hands. They might decide that your existence offends them, Daenerys. Another dragon-blooded rival with actual dragons. They have presumably done quite well without you. And what if they have plans for Westeros? Daenerys asked, suddenly sharp. You speak of rivals as if there were not already half a dozen across the narrow sea. Cersei Lannister, whoever lives in the ruins of Winterfell and Riverrun now, the Greyjoys with their ships, and, somewhere, this boy with black hair and my brother's name whom every whisperer seems to think is king. Add to that a hidden Valyria, waiting, and tell me again why ignorance is wise. Tyrion's mouth pressed into a thin line. Because we cannot fight all our battles at once. We may not have a choice, she said. The world does not wait for queens to feel ready. Her gaze dropped to the dagger, pinning the map of Essos. Its point pierced the smoking sea, drawing a small circle in the parchment where the ink had stopped. Beyond that, the ragged line of old Valyria's broken peninsula. For all my life, I have been told I am the last of my house, she said. The last Targaryen, the last dragon. Perhaps that was never true. Perhaps, somewhere, my bloodline never ended at deposed kings and exiled children. If they live, they are part of my story, whether I will or no. And if your story ends at their hands? Tyrion asked softly. Then it was a poor story, Daenerys said. And I was never meant to be queen. She stood, palms flat on the table. Candlelight limned the silver in her hair. This is not a whim, not a chase after some childhood fantasy. I will not run to them. I will go to look them in the eye and see what they are. If they are monsters, I will know what shape the monster wears. If they are kin, I will know what part of myself I must accept or reject. I owe myself that much. I owe the world that much. Missandei's voice was soft. You would leave Meereen so soon, Your Grace? I would not abandon it, she said. I will leave a garrison, a council. Tyrion, you will remain. So will Grey Worm. Missandei, if you choose. I will take only what I must. Dragons, some unsullied, a few ships. Enough to see, not to conquer. The words had a weight that settled into the room like new stones laid in a foundation. In Daenerys's chest, the ache of restlessness eased a little. The path ahead was still wreathed in smoke, but at least it existed. She walked the city that night, with her hair hidden beneath a plain shawl and only a handful of unsullied in her wake. Meereen's streets were narrow canyons of brick and plaster, their upper stories leaning close enough to blot out much of the sky. Laundry hung limp across alleys. The air was thick with the scents of frying onions, roasting goat, incense, and the latrines that never seemed to be emptied as often as they should. Children darted through the crowds, their shrill laughter ringing off the walls. A girl not yet 10 summers old ran past Daenerys with a wooden dragon clutched in one hand, its paint chipped but bright. When she laughed, Daenerys saw small white scars on her wrists where shackles had once rubbed the skin raw. In the square of the Old Masters, the great bronze harpy that had once loomed over the city lay toppled, its wings broken. Chains hung from its neck and limbs, each link cut, some looped with flowers or colored ribbon. Freedmen sat on its fallen body, sharing flatbread and stew. One sang softly in a rough but earnest tenor, a song in Giscari about fields and empty skies. Daenerys watched from the shadow of a doorway. This, she reminded herself, was why she had come to Slaver's Bay. Why she had stayed when every whisper urged her toward Westeros, to tear down harpies and cut chains, to give these children a life that was theirs. And yet, even here, she saw the cracks. Men who had once been slave soldiers now strutted like petty lords. Freedmen who had grown rich on trade spoke with the same patronizing tones the old masters had used. Not all chains were metal. A group of former masters passed by, their fine silks gone, replaced by simpler robes. They kept their eyes lowered when they saw the unsullied, shoulders bowed, but Daenerys saw the glances they exchanged when they thought no one watched. Sharp, calculating, resentful. You should be sleeping, Your Grace, Yora murmured at her side. Or planning, not walking alleys where a dagger could be waiting behind any shutter. I have a dagger of my own, she said, fingers brushing the dragonbone hilt beneath her cloak. And 3 dragons overhead. Drogon's shadow flickered briefly across the street, eliciting gasps and pointing fingers. He was hunting tonight, soaring far above the rooftops, a darker blot on the darkness. Rhaegal and Viserion had taken to following him, though they returned more often to the pyramids than their elder brother did. "Do you think they would follow me into the smoking sea?" she asked without really expecting an answer. Yora hesitated. "They followed you into the Dothraki Sea," he said at last. "Into Karth, into battle. Wherever you went, they went. I see no reason that would change now. They are fire made flesh," she said. "Perhaps they long to fly over the place that birthed their kind. Or perhaps they do not understand Valyria any more than they would Winterfell or Casterly Rock," Yora said gently. "They know you, that is all." Was it? Daenerys watched the fallen harpy for a moment longer. A boy was climbing its broken wing, laughing, his bare feet black with dust. A woman in a headscarf called him down, half scolding, half laughing herself. Meereen was not free, not yet. Perhaps it never would be, not truly, not in the way she imagined when she had stood before the gates with her army and her dragons and her anger. Men would always find new ways to bind each other, but they would never again bind this city with chains of iron and whips of leather, not if she could help it. "If there are still dragonlords in the world," she said softly, "I must know what kind of rulers they are. If they are as cruel as the old tales say, perhaps I can learn how not to be." Yora's face softened. "You are not them, Khaleesi. I am their daughter," she said. "If some branch of my family remained behind when the rest fled, if they bought their survival with sorcery and sacrifice, then some part of me was born from that choice. I will not turn my face from it." She turned away from the square and its mingled laughter and resentment. The Unsullied moved with her, their spears a silent forest. Above, Drogon roared again, a sound that seemed, for a heartbeat, to come from farther west than the sky allowed. He looked smaller without the open sky around him. In the cell, with its low ceiling and single-barred window high up on the wall, Captain Garran was just another man worn thin by fear and salt. His hands shook as he raised them to shield his eyes from the lantern's glare when the door opened. "Your Grace," he rasped when Daenerys stepped inside. He tried to stand, but his legs betrayed him and he ended up half rising, half collapsing back onto the bench. "You are not a prisoner," she told him. "You are a guest under guard, until I know what to make of the tale you brought me." He gave a hoarse laugh. "Freedom smells much the same as captivity in here." Missandei set the lantern on a hook. The light softened the hard angles of her face. "You have been given food, water, and clean clothes," she said. "More than many in the lower city receive. More than I had upon that cursed sea," Garran admitted. His eyes darted to the dagger at Daenerys' waist, then back to her face. "You have decided, then? You believe me?" "I believe that you saw something," she said. "Whether it was dragonlords or only your own terror reflected back at you, I cannot yet say. But I mean to find out." His throat bobbed. "You are going," he said, "to Valyria. To what remains of it," she answered. "You will guide me as far as you can." At that, genuine panic flared in his eyes. "No," he whispered. "No, Your Grace. Begging your pardon, but I will not set foot on that water again. I would sooner swim the length of the Jade Sea with millstones at my ankles." "You know its currents now," she said. "You have seen the mists, the rocks. There is no man in Meereen better suited to the task. There is no man in Meereen who has looked on that accursed shore and lived to speak of it either," he said. "I cheated death once. Do not ask me to tempt him again." Daenerys studied him. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cell's comparative cool. His fingers twisted in the rough blanket as if seeking anchor. "Tell me again," she said quietly. "The hall you saw, the riders, spare me nothing. If I am to risk my life and the lives of those who follow me, I will not do it for half-remembered shadows." He swallowed, then spoke. The words came haltingly at first, then faster, as if some blockage broke within him. "We had already lost 2 men to the storms by then," he said, "and 1 to madness." He threw himself overboard when the fog came, said he heard voices calling his name from under the waves. We never saw him again. The sea turned black, Your Grace, not dark as ordinary depth, but thick, as if ink had been poured into it. It hissed when it touched the hull. There were islands or rocks, like fingers clawing up from the deep, smoking at the tips. We could not steer clear. The current dragged us where it willed. He closed his eyes. Then the fog thinned, and I saw towers. Great white things, some broken, some whole. Bridges of stone crossing chasms full of fire. Dragons on the wing. One so large I thought it a mountain until it moved. Others smaller, darting between the ruins. Their cries, "God save me," I can still hear them. "And the people?" Daenerys asked. "On a cliff above our starboard side," he said. "A hall with a wide balcony. I saw torches and the glint of armor. Then they stepped into the light. A woman first, in a gown of black and red. Her hair was like yours. Then a man, older, with a beard as white as his hair. There were more behind them. They looked down at us and one pointed. I couldn't hear their words over the sea, but I did not need to. A dragon dived, silver and black, its wings throwing off sparks as it fell. Fire boiled from its jaws. The sea caught light. Men screamed. His breathing quickened, eyes going distant. Missandei took half a step forward, then stilled when Daenerys lifted a hand. "We should have died," Garran whispered. "All of us." But there was a lurch, as if the world itself had shifted. The cliff crumbled. The hall, I swear by all the gods, it vanished, like smoke blown by a great wind. One moment it was there, the next nothing but rock and flame. I was thrown. When I woke, my ship was drifting. No cliff, no hall, no dragon, only this. His gaze flicked to her belt again. "If you go there, Your Grace, know that you walk where the world breaks." "And you would leave it to them?" Daenerys asked. "To hide there, in their broken halls, while the rest of us bleed?" He gave her a long, searching look. "You are young," he said. "You still believe that all evils must be faced. Some. It is enough to know they exist and steer clear." "Perhaps," she said. "But then some other sailor will stumble upon them, less able to resist their promises. Or they will come forth of their own accord, when it suits them. No, if there is a fire burning in the west, I will not turn my face from it." He sagged. "Then I pray your dragons are as fierce as they say, Your Grace. For I swear, by whatever gods still listen, that the fire there is older than any of us." The sea at night was a different country, and one Daenerys had not visited often since her youth. From Drogon's back, it lay below her like a sheet of hammered silver, the moon's reflection broken into shards by waves. The air tasted of salt and cold, sharp and clean after the oven heat of Meereen streets. She had not meant to fly so far. At first, she had only wanted to feel the wind on her face, to let her dragons stretch their wings, to shake loose the suffocating weight of stone walls and whispered counsels. But Drogon had climbed and climbed, his powerful wing beats lifting them higher until the city was a smudge of light behind them and all the world seemed reduced to sky and sea. Rhaegal and Viserion flanked them, their cries thin and wild in the thin air. They dove and rose again, playing in the currents. Drogon flew more steadily, his body a living engine of heat beneath her. When she pressed her cheek to his neck, she felt the steady, deep thud of his heart. She urged him west without fully thinking. Felt, right? The word beat in her blood. West, west. Not toward Pentos or Volantis or any place she had sailed before, but toward something colder and more ancient. The wind whipped her hair back, tore at her eyes until they watered. She laughed once, a short, fierce sound snatched away by the air. Up here, with the dragons and the stars, she could almost believe she had been born for this alone. To ride the winds between worlds, to bridge the distances no ship could safely cross. A memory surfaced unbidden. Rhaegar's statue in the House of the Undying, harp in hand, saying softly, "There must be one more. The dragon has 3 heads." She had puzzled over it then, wondering if he spoke of children, of siblings, of some triad of power. Now, for the first time, she wondered if the one more had not yet been born at all, or if it waited, sleeping, in the ruins of Valyria. Drogon banked slightly, as if sensing her thoughts. For a heartbeat, Daenerys fancied she heard something beyond the rush of wind and the cry of her dragons. A faint, distant note, like a horn blown far away. It seemed to come from beyond the horizon, from a darkness deeper than night. "Home," the sense whispered again. "Or not quite a word, but a longing." "Is that what you feel?" she murmured into Drogon's scales. "A call? Do you remember a place you never flew over?" He roared, and the sound was as much answer as she could expect. It echoed over the water, startling some great school of fish into leaping flashes of silver far below. She could fly on, fly until her arms ached and her thighs burned and the sea below changed, grew darker, thinned with smoke. She could urge Drogon toward the rumor of fire and ruins and see with her own eyes what waited there. But she was not only a rider, she was a queen. Queens did not fly into danger alone on impulse and leave their people to pick up the pieces of their absence. Reluctantly, she turned Drogon's head back toward the faint glow of Meereen. The city rose slowly over the curve of the world, its pyramids pricking the sky like black teeth. Rhaegal and Viserion wheeled around to follow, their bodies cutting dark paths across the stars. "We will go," she promised the wind, the dragons, herself, "but we will go with purpose. With ships beneath us and spears at our back. We will not drift, helpless, into their jaws." The seaside beneath them, indifferent. The horizon held its secrets a while longer. The morning came gray and hazed, the sun a bleary coin behind a veil of high cloud. Meereen's harbor was already alive with movement when Daenerys reached it. Ropes creaked, men shouted, crates thudded onto decks. The sharp, clean smell of the sea fought with the heavier sense of the city. 3 ships lay moored closest to the main pier, their hulls newly tarred, their sails mended where storms or battle had torn them. The largest, a broad-bellied cog from Karth, bore a fresh-painted sigil of a black dragon on its main sail, more for the morale of those aboard than any heraldic accuracy. Beside it, Garran's charred Stormdancer rode low in the water, her burns patched with new planks, her masts replaced. The scars remained, black streaks against the pale wood. On the 3rd ship, men were loading barrels of water and salted meat. Gray worms stood at the head of 200 unsullied, their spears gleaming, their bald heads bare to the morning air. Behind them, a smaller knot of freedmen and volunteers shifted nervously, clutching spears or bows. They had stepped forward when Daenerys announced her intent, drawn by curiosity, loyalty, or simple hunger for adventure. She had warned them that the dangers were unknown. They had bowed anyway. Tyrion looked as if he had not slept. Dark circles pooled beneath his eyes, and his hair was more untidy than usual. He wore no armor, only a plain doublet and cloak, but there was a gravity about him that had nothing to do with clothes. "You could still choose not to go," he said as she approached. "Send scouts. Send Garran back alone, with a few expendable souls and a large amount of courage. See if his tale repeats itself before you risk your own head." "If I send others to face a danger I will not share," she replied. "What sort of queen does that make me?" "A pragmatic one," he said. "But I recognize a lost argument when I see one. It's the same expression you wore before locking your dragons away and again before you freed them. For what it's worth, I have adjusted our plans for Westeros to assume a delay. With luck, Cersei will obligingly remain insane in your absence." "Cersei Lannister is not the only fire I must reckon with," Daenerys said. "If there is a blaze smoldering in Valyria, I will not leave it to flare up behind me when I march on King's Landing." Missandei stepped closer. "The Meereenese Council has been chosen, Your Grace," she said. "Representatives from the freedmen and the former masters, with Skahaz Emo Kandak as their enthusiastic overseer. There was a hint of wryness in her tone at that last. "They have sworn to maintain your laws in your absence. They will be tested," Daenerys said. "If they fail, I will hear of it. And when I return, I will remember." She rested a hand on Grey Worm's shoulder. "The city is in your care," she told him. "Protect the people. Do not let the sons of the Harpy think my absence weakness." He bowed, fist to chest. "I will obey, my queen." She turned then to the west. The sea lay before her, flat and gray, stretching toward horizons she had only ever imagined. Somewhere beyond sight, the waters darkened and steamed. Somewhere, if sailors and priests and a half-mad captain spoke true, white towers still stood over chasms of fire, and men with her hair and eyes watched the world from stone balconies. Daenerys drew a slow breath. The Valyrian steel dagger at her hip pressed cold against her side, a reminder of all that waited. Blood, flame. Those who were not taken. "I was a child when I first heard the word Valyria," she said softly, mostly to herself. "It was a story then, a place that had burned and fallen before my father's father was born. A warning, a boast, a ghost." Tyrion looked up at her. "And now it is a question," she said. "What did my ancestors save when they fled? What did they leave behind? What sins built the stones I am supposed to stand upon? If there are answers to be found, they lie there in the smoke and the ruins. I would rather face them on my terms than wait for them to come to me." She stepped onto the gangplank of the Stormdancer. The wood thudded softly under her boots. Drogon shrieked above, his cry rolling over the harbor like a promise. Rhaegal and Viserion echoed him, their shadows sweeping over deck and dock alike. Men cheered. Some crossed themselves in the manner of their gods. Others only stared, eyes wide, as queen and dragons claimed the charred ship that had once fled Valyria and now sailed toward it. Daenerys did not look back at Meereen as the gangplank was drawn up and the mooring ropes cast off. She had learned that leaving was easier when one did not linger on doorways. The sails filled with wind. The harbor's walls slipped slowly past. Ahead, the open sea waited, its surface deceptively calm. "West," she told Garran, who stood at the wheel with his jaw clenched and knuckles white on the spokes. "To the smoking sea." "As you command, your grace," he said hoarsely. The Stormdancer turned her charred prow toward the gray horizon. The other ships fell into line behind her, dragon banners snapping in the rising breeze. Above, 3 dragons wheeled like omens. Daenerys Targaryen stood at the bow, hand resting on the dragonbone hilt at her side, hair whipping about her face. Somewhere beyond sight, a dead empire muttered in its sleep. She was coming to wake it. The first days were almost disappointingly ordinary. The Stormdancer rolled and creaked and climbed the long swells like any other ship that had ever left Meereen's harbor. The wind came steady out of the east, smelling of salt and far-off coasts, filling the patched sails until they bellied like pregnant mares. The other 2 ships held their distance off the port and starboard quarters, their dragon-painted flags snapping in the same wind. Men cursed, spat, sang, mended nets, shifted casks, and scratched salt rashes. The sea did not care that a queen and her dragons rode upon it now. It had swallowed kings and beggars alike. Daenerys spent the first morning at the bow, cloak wrapped close against the spray. The deck rose and fell beneath her like a living thing. It had been some time since she had sailed anywhere. The motion brought back memories unbidden. The deck of the cog that had carried her from Pentos to the Dothraki Sea, the reek of horses and tar, Viserys prowling like a caged cat. Later, the black ships that had ferried her along Slaver's Bay. Each new city another promise, another disappointment. This voyage felt different. It was not Conquest that called her, not yet. It was something older, a question whose answer lay hidden under steam and legend. "Not so bad," Dario observed, coming to lean against the railing with the easy grace of a man who had never known seasickness in his life. His blue and gold cloak snapped in the wind, making him look like some flamboyant seabird. "I have had worse voyages." Once, with the Stormcrows, we spent 6 days in a storm off Liss. The captain wept like a child. I kept him from throwing himself overboard by threatening to kill him if he did. That seems counter to the point, Daenerys said. Women and priests worry about points, Daario said. Sellswords worry about keeping their boots dry. His gaze flicked upward. Drogon was only a dark shape far above, riding the currents, while Rhaegal and Viserion chased each other in looping spirals. They like it out here, he remarked. All the sky, no walls. So do I, she said. It was not entirely true. She had come to appreciate walls when they were hers. But out here, with only sea and horizon, she could pretend for a while that the burdens of queenhood lay farther away than the receding coastline of Meereen. Jorah joined them after some time, his steps sure despite the ship's pitch. He had shed his heavy mail for a leather jerkin better suited to salt and spray. Sunlight picked out the silver at his temples. Garran says we have 3, perhaps 4 days before we reach waters he does not like to name, the knight reported. Until then, we follow the trade winds as any merchant would. 3 days, Daenerys repeated. It sounded both too long and too brief. Jorah's eyes sought hers, searching as if for doubt. You can still turn back, he said, or change our course for Pentos, for Volantis. No one would call you craven for shunning the smoking sea. Some would, Daario said cheerfully, but I would not tell them to their faces. Daenerys smiled despite herself, then let the expression fade. I have turned back from too many things in my life, she said, or had them ripped from me before I could ever reach them. My parents, my home, the throne my brother dreamed of. This time I mean to look. If Valyria still draws breath, I will see its chest rise and fall with my own eyes. She rested her palm on the hilt at her side. The dragonbone heads were cool beneath her fingers. The sea breeze tugged at her hair, whipping silver strands free of their braids. Far ahead, the horizon lay flat and blank and deceptively peaceful. Behind them, Meereen was already little more than a smudge on the eastern sky. Below, in the belly of the ship, the world narrowed to wood and darkness, and the scent of old salt soaked into the planks. Lanterns swung in their hooks with every roll, sending shadows rocking back and forth across the curved ceiling. Men snored in their hammocks, or lay awake staring at nothing, listening to the creaks and groans around them as if the Stormdancer were an animal muttering in its sleep. Garran had spread his maps out on an overturned crate that served as a table, weighting the corners with a pewter cup and a small sack of dried beans. They were not fine maps, no maester's work, but they bore the marks of long use. Thumb-smudged edges, creases that lined up with well-worn routes, hastily inked notes in cramped Volantene script. The smoking sea was a gray, vaguely shaped mass in the western part of one parchment, its borders more suggestion than fact. No sane man charts the currents there in detail, Garran said hoarsely, tapping the blank expanse. If you are close enough to measure, you are too close already. Still, I have marked where the water began to thicken on my last voyage. The first hiss of it against the hull, the smell of something like brimstone. We will know when we reach that line. The sea itself will tell us. Daenerys sat on a sea chest bolted to the floor, knees braced to compensate for the ship's motion. The map's inked lines did not mean much to her. She had never learned the maester's arts, but she could follow the shape of the coast, the curve of Esso's eastern edge, the narrowing of the world where the narrow sea kissed Slaver's Bay. Beyond that, only suggestions. You came in from the north before, she said, tracing the route with one finger. Driven by storms and corsairs. This time we go straight, from east to west. As straight as the winds will allow, Garran said. His eyes were fixed on the dagger resting on the map's edge, as if it might leap up and bite him. Your Grace, I beg you, once we feel the first signs, the hiss, the heat, let us skirt south along the margins. We can look from afar. There is no need to plunge into the heart. She met his gaze. You saw the hall from afar, she reminded him. You were close enough to catch a glimpse and be burned for it. Skirting did you little good then. His mouth tightened, It spared me my life, for which I am grateful, she said. You brought me the first truth I have had in years about my homeland, but half-truths will not serve forever. If there is a ward, as Kinvara's flames suggest, some boundary that keeps the worst of the doom at bay around this enclave, we must cross it to find any safety at all. Safety, he repeated. The word seemed to taste bitter on his tongue. There is no safety in that place, only less death and more. Daenerys looked down at the blade. Its rippling surface swallowed the lantern light in a way that made her eyes ache. Gently, she turned it so the runes caught the glow. Blood, flame, remembrance, she murmured in high Valyrian. Those who were not taken. Garran shivered. It speaks to you, doesn't it? It is steel, she said. Steel remembers the forge, perhaps. The hands that held it. Nothing more. Yet when she closed her hand around the hilt, the whisper came again, soft and insistent at the back of her mind. Not words, exactly, but a sense, a feeling. A hall on a cliff, hot wind blowing from a churning sea, a chant rising in some language she almost knew. Do you dream of it? She asked suddenly. Since you left, has it followed you? He pressed his lips together. That was answer enough. I do not sleep well either, she said quietly. My dreams have been full of dragons and fire since the day I stepped into Khal Drogo's pyre. Sometimes they are visions, sometimes they are lies. This place may be both, but I will not run from it in the dark. I will walk into it with open eyes. He laughed once, a dry, scraping sound. You talk like a hero from stories, Your Grace. Heroes die young in the real world. I have tried dying already, she said. It did not take. She slid the dagger back into its sheath. The rasp of blade on leather sounded final somehow. When she rose, the ship's motion shifted under her feet as if reminding her that all of this, the maps, the fears, the decisions, rode on a few fingers of wood between them and a cold, hungry sea. The third night, the wind changed. It did not howl or rage. It died. One moment the sails were full, the lines creaking, the ship leaning comfortably into the breeze. The next they hung slack, canvas flapping listlessly as if someone had cut the world's breath. The Stormdancer shuddered, then drifted, her prow swinging slowly on an invisible pivot. Men muttered on deck. Some spat over the side, or crossed themselves in the fashion of their several gods. Others merely stared upward as if the sky might have answers written on it. Daenerys felt the change in her bones before she quite understood what it was. The air had gone heavier, as if laden with invisible weight. Her hair clung to her neck. Breathing felt like drinking. Garran came stumbling up from below, nearly colliding with an unsullied as the ship rolled on a small swell. His eyes were wide. We have reached the line, he said without preamble, voice rough with something that was not quite panic. Feel it, Your Grace. The sea holds its breath. She stepped to the rail and looked down. In the lantern light, the water seemed darker than before. Not simply deep, but thick. The waves slower to rise and fall, as if sluggish. When she watched closely, she thought she saw faint tendrils of vapor curling up from the crests, vanishing in the heavy air. A faint hiss threaded through the usual slap and suck of waves against hull. It was not loud, but it was constant, like the aftermath of a match struck too close to water. The men feel it, Yora said quietly, joining her. They have begun calling this the Breathless Belt. They are not wrong, Garran muttered. Here the currents change. The winds misbehave. We will be lucky to find any breeze at all until we reach the mists. Comforting, Dario remarked, though his eyes were more alert than his tone. I have always wanted to be becalmed in the middle of a haunted sea where the water itself is trying to cook our hull. Drogon shrieked overhead, a harsh, displeased sound. When Daenerys looked up, she saw the black dragon turning tight circles, wings beating harder than they should have needed to at this height. The air resisted him too, thick and strange. Rhaegal and Viserion glided more awkwardly, their usual playfulness dampened. She closed her eyes for a moment and reached inward along that strange, bright tether that linked her to them. It was easier with Drogon, always. He burned against her mind like a coal. The air tastes wrong came a sense more than words. Hot, heavy, like the breath of a deep cave. Beneath, something stirs. Her fingers tightened on the rail. Beneath what? She whispered, though she knew he could not answer with that kind of precision. Dragons felt in broad strokes, not details. Yora watched her face. What is it? The sea is not empty, she said. They feel something under us. Heat. The doom, Garran whispered, and made a warding gesture with 2 fingers and a thumb. They say it never truly ended. The fires that broke Valyria still burn at the bottom of the world, boiling the sea. That is why the water hisses, why the air grows thick. We are sailing over wounds that never closed. Daenerys looked out at the dark, flat horizon. Lightning flickered there, faint and far, without accompanying thunder. It looked wrong somehow, too slow, as if crawling instead of striking. Lower the sails, she ordered. We will not rip our masts uselessly. Put out half the lanterns. I would not have us blaze like a beacon if anything watches from the shore we seek. Men hurried to obey. The creak and thud of blocks and lines filled the unnatural stillness for a time, then faded. The world shrank to the soft glimmer of a few shielded lights and the black shapes of dragons overhead. In the heavy, breathless dark, Daenerys felt the weight of all the stories she had ever heard about this place pressing in around her. Valyria, the doom, the end of an age. Men turned to stone where they stood, mountains screaming as they split, dragons falling from skies turned to fire. She had burned a city herself. She knew something of what it was to break the world. She wondered, not for the first time, what sort of people chose to remain at the heart of such a wound. Sleep came to her in fits and starts, punctuated by the groaning of timbers and the occasional shouted order from above. When it finally took her properly, it did so with the suddenness of a wave crashing over a swimmer's head. She stood barefoot on smooth stone, warm under her soles. The air smelled of sulfur, iron, and something sweet and metallic she could not name. Wind tugged at her hair, bringing with it the roar of distant fire and the deeper, bone-vibrating bellow of dragons. Valyria, she thought, without knowing how she knew. The city unfolded around her, vast and impossible. Pale towers soared so high their upper stories were lost in a haze of steam. Bridges leapt from spire to spire, delicate arches that should not have been able to bear their own weight. Below, rivers of molten rock glowed orange and white, flowing through channels carved into the earth, some vanishing into dark tunnels, others spilling out into vast smoking basins where men and women guided the lava's heat with gestures and glowing rods. Dragons filled the sky. Sleek, sinuous shapes darted between towers, their scales flashing every color of fire. One vast beast slept curled around the base of a central citadel, its body the size of a small mountain, its breathing slow and tectonic. On the balcony where she stood, railings of pale stone carved into intertwining dragons framed the view. A city spread to every horizon, unbroken, unruined. She felt an ache in her chest so deep it was almost physical. This had been hers, once. Not her personally, but her blood's. This had been the height from which everything else tumbled. A child stood beside her. So close Daenerys wondered how she had missed her. A girl of perhaps 12, with hair like spun silver and eyes a deep, uncanny violet. She wore a simple tunic belted at the waist with a strip of leather etched with tiny, glowing runes. Her bare feet, like Daenerys's, gripped the warm stone. "You are late," the girl said in High Valyrian, her accent strange and old-fashioned. "The others are already in the lower halls, preparing the wards." "Who are you?" Daenerys asked. Her own Valyrian sounded softer, worn by centuries of use. The girl tilted her head. "You know me," she said, "or you will. Blood calls to blood. Fire to fire." She looked out over the city, nose wrinkling. "It stinks today. The earth is restless. The priests say we must give it more." "Give it what?" "Blood, of course," the girl said, as if it were obvious. We must always give blood or the foundations crack. The dragons below grow hungry. The air grows wrong. My father says. A rumble interrupted her. The balcony shook under their feet. Somewhere in the distance, a tower fell, slow and dreamlike, its upper stories breaking free and tumbling as if in honey. People screamed. Dragons screamed louder. The sky darkened. A line appeared on the horizon, black and sharp, racing toward the city. It was not a wall of water and not a wall of fire, but some unholy combination, boiling and roaring, eating the world as it came. The girl grabbed Daenerys' hand. Her small fingers were shockingly warm. "It is too soon," she whispered. "We did not give enough." Daenerys tried to pull her back from the edge, but the stone under their feet lurched, cracked. Heat blasted up from below, searing her lungs. The great dragon at the base of the citadel opened one eye, molten gold slitted with black. His gaze pinned her where she stood. Those who were not taken, something rumbled, not in words but in the grinding of stone. The wave hit. She woke choking. Her hammock swung violently. Men shouted in the dark. The Stormdancer tossed like a toy, rising and falling on waves that should not exist in Windless sea. Lanterns banged against beams. Someone cried out in pain as they were thrown to the floor. Daenerys lurched upright, heart pounding, the ghost of heat still in her throat. The air in the cabin smelled of damp wool and fear, not sulfur, but she could almost taste ash on her tongue. The ship bucked again. A cask broke loose from its lashings and thudded across the floor, narrowly missing her bare feet. "On deck!" she gasped and fumbled for her boots. The night above was black as a shut eye. No stars, no moon, only a low, oppressive ceiling of cloud that seemed to press down on the sea until it bulged upward in protest. The Stormdancer climbed one of those bulges now, her bow pointing at the sky, then slid down the far side, her timbers screaming. Waves rose and fell without pattern, taller and steeper than they had any right to be in such dead air. The sails hung limp, yet the ship raced as if pushed by invisible hands. "Hold fast," Jorah bellowed, bracing his broad frame against the rail as a curtain of water crashed over the deck. Men clung to rigging, to masts, to each other. One lost his grip and skidded toward the rail, hands scrabbling on wet planks. Daenerys lunged without thinking. Her fingers caught his wrist just as he went over. For an instant, his full weight yanked at her shoulder, pain lancing down her arm. Then Jorah's hand closed over his other wrist, and between them they hauled him back onto the deck. He lay gasping, eyes rolled white. "Thank you," he choked. "Thank us by not falling again," Jorah said grimly. Dario staggered past, cursing cheerfully as he kicked a loose coil of rope away from the scuppers. "I've fucked calmer beds than this," he shouted, laughter wild in his voice. "Is this how Valyria greets her queen? She is a rough hostess." Drogon shrieked overhead, fighting the same strange swells in the air that the Stormdancer did below. He dove close to the mast, wings beating hard, then climbed again in a spray of luminous droplets. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, their cries high and distressed. The sea hissed. Daenerys forced herself to listen past the crashes and shouts. It was there, under everything, a relentless, whispering seethe. The water around the hull glowed faintly in places, as if lit from below. When the next wave crested, its underside was veined with a dull red light. "Look," she said hoarsely, pointing. Jorah followed her gaze. His face went pale. "The fires," he murmured. "Garran was right." "Where is he?" she called. "Here." The Volantene captain clung to the wheel, knuckles bone-white on the spokes. His hair was plastered to his skull, his beard dripping. "The current's taken us, your grace. I can hold our nose to the swell, no more. The sea decides the rest." As if to emphasize his words, the ship lurched sideways, caught by some cross-current that had no business existing. Men yelled, scrambling as the deck tilted. Daenerys' stomach flipped. She felt the dagger at her hip press into her side, its weight oddly steady amid the chaos. Her hand went to it as if of its own accord. The moment her palm wrapped around the hilt, a strange calm flooded her. Not peace. Valyrian steel did not know that word. But focus. The screaming sea narrowed, became a pattern of forces and flows. She felt, impossibly, the shape of the currents beneath them, as if the blade were an extension of the water's own memory. Below, the earth burns. Something murmured in the back of her mind. Above, the sky holds its breath. Between, the survivors cling. She set her feet, braced herself against a support beam, and turned northward, toward the starless dark. "We ride it out," she shouted. "No turning back. Keep the bows into the largest swells." "Drogon!" Her cry tore at her throat. The dragon answered with a roar that split the heavy air. In a rush of wind and spray, he dropped closer, his bulk briefly providing a lee against the worst of the next wave. For a few heartbeats, the ship's motion eased. "Use him," Garran gasped. "By all the gods, if he'll let you, use him to break the worst of it." She did. Over the next hour, if it was an hour, time had lost its edges. They used dragon flesh as breakwater, dragonfire as beacon. Drogon skimmed the crests of waves that rose like black cliffs, his furnace breath turning their tops to steam before they could smash full force into the Stormdancer's flanks. Rhaegal and Viserion darted and wove, their bodies creating turbulent eddies in the air that steadied the masts. At last, as suddenly as it had begun, the swell eased. The waves shrank, became the ordinary roll of open water. The oppressive weight in the air lightened by a fraction. Men sagged where they stood. Some laughed, high and brittle. Others wept openly, not caring who saw. Daenerys released her grip on the dagger. Her fingers ached. When she looked down, she saw four crescent-shaped indentations in her palm where the dragon heads had bitten the skin. Tiny beads of blood welled there, bright and startling. Blood, flame, remembrance. She closed her hand into a fist, smearing the blood. The hiss of the sea continued, softer now, like the breathing of some great sleeping beast. Dawn came grudgingly, bleeding into the sky in bruised stripes of violet and gray instead of the clean gold she was used to. The clouds overhead were low and broken, wisps of darker vapor twisting between them like smoke with nowhere to go. The sun itself was a dull, reddish disk, its edges blurred. The sea had changed color. It was not the blue-gray of open water, but a thick, almost black hue tinged here and there with a queer green. Wherever the waves broke, steam rose in thin veils. It smelled of metal and rot and something sharp that stung the inside of her nose. "Welcome to the smoking sea," Garran said softly, as if afraid to speak too loudly. "She has not grown friendlier since last I saw her." Low shapes squatted on the horizon, more felt than seen at first. As the hours passed, they grew islands, if such stunted things could be called that. Some were little more than jagged humps of black rock protruding from the water, their surfaces crusted with glittering glass. Others rose in broken tiers, like the fragments of some larger structure dragged down and reassembled by careless hands. Smoke seeped from cracks and fissures in many of them, thin and constant. In places, the smoke glowed faintly from within, as if banking coals lay just beneath the surface. "Are those buildings?" Yora asked, squinting. On one larger island, something that might have been a tower jutted at an angle from the rock, half collapsed, its upper stories sheared clean away. "Were," Garran said, "before the doom. Now they are shells. Tombs. I do not like to come this close." "You have been closer," Daenerys reminded him. "I was younger and more foolish then," he said. "Also desperate. I had pirates on one side and a storm on the other. Now I have only you." The other two ships followed at a cautious distance, their captains signaling frequently with flags and lamps. Daenerys had ordered that if the Stormdancer went down, they were to make for the nearest safe coast at once. No one was to play hero in these waters. Steam curled up around the hull as the ship slid between two smoking islets. The hissing grew louder. In some places, the water itself seemed to bubble, pockets of gas erupting with soft plops that stank of eggs gone bad. Men wrapped cloths around their faces. The dragons flew lower. Drogon skimmed so close to the surface once that his wingtips sent up a fan of sizzling droplets. He snorted, shaking his head as if in distaste. Rhaegal and Viserion stayed higher, their pale bodies ghostly in the murk. Daenerys' eyes burned from the vapor. She refused to blink. Every ruin, every shard of tower that rose from the black water, she studied as if it might suddenly resolve into the hall from her dream. "Do you see it?" she asked at last. "The cliff, the balcony, the hall." Garran licked cracked lips. His gaze scanned the horizon, moving in small, jerky motions. "Not yet," he said, "but the currents feel wrong, stronger, as if something beneath is pulling." He swallowed. "We did not come this way last time. The storm drove us in from the north. This path is new. Your priest's fire suggested your dragonlord's refuge lies nearer the heart. I do not like it." "Nor do I," she said. "But we are not the same helpless ship you were then." She looked up at the dragons again. They were not simply beasts now. They were banners, weapons, symbols. Whatever hid here would see them and know they were not alone in the sky. That thought should have comforted her. It did not. The channel appeared out of the steam like a wound. One moment there was only a vague dark ahead. The next, the Stormdancer found herself aiming between two sheer walls of black stone that rose from the water like the sides of a giant's coffin. The rock was slick and glassy in places, dull and pitted in others, as if half melted and cooled. Steam poured up from countless fissures, veiling the upper reaches in roiling white. "Hard to port," Garran shouted, panic shattering his usual gruffness as he spun the wheel. The ship responded sluggishly, the thick water tugging at her keel. For a terrible moment Daenerys thought they would slam full-on into the right-hand wall. Men braced for impact. Someone screamed. At the last moment the bow swung aside, scraping past the stone with a sound like a sword being drawn across slate. Sparks leapt where hull kissed rock, brief and angry. The Stormdancer shuddered, but did not break. "Your Grace, we should turn back," Garran gasped. "There is no way through here. This is madness." "Madness would be to leave without seeing," Daenerys said through gritted teeth. The channel narrowed ahead, then widened again into a basin where the steam rose in thicker columns. The air felt scalding in her throat. On the rocks to either side she saw marks. Not the random pitting of heat and time, but shapes. Carvings, half melted, as if some sculptor had been interrupted mid-work by a god's hand. Dragon heads, jaws open, their eyes gouged out by molten flows. Strange runes in a script older than any maester's book, their lines blurred but not wholly lost. "Do you see?" she breathed. This was not all nature. There were hands here, minds. Yora squinted upward. Sweat ran into his beard. "Valyrians carved their own harbors into the rock," he said slowly. "I've read of it. Berths that rose and fell with the tides, lined with chains to hold dragons. Perhaps this is what remains of such a harbor," Daenerys finished. Her heart thudded faster. "A place meant to receive dragonlords, or to keep others out," he said. The channel bent slightly, then again. Every turn felt like a choice. Forward into heat and uncertainty, or back into the relative safety of the open, hissing sea. Each time, she nodded to Garran, and each time, he swore softly and steered onward. At last, with a suddenness that made her stagger, the walls fell away. The Stormdancer slipped into a wider expanse of water, still ringed by rock but open to a rectangle of sky more pale than the bruised dome overhead. Steam thinned a little, revealing more of the surrounding stone. On one promontory, a dragon's head jutted out of the cliff face, carved on a scale that dwarfed ships. Its eyes were twin hollows, its mouth a cave. The rock around it had run in frozen rivulets, like wax, but the shape remained. "Someone wanted those who came here to know whose domain this was," Daenerys said. "No one cares anymore," Garran muttered. "Dead empires and their toys. We should go." She did not answer. Something pricked at her senses, just beyond sight. Not a sound exactly, but the absence of one. The hiss of the sea had faded. The air felt held. Her hand went once more to the dagger at her hip. She didn't see it at first. She felt it. The Stormdancer, which had been gliding forward under scant sail and the push of some ponderous current, slowed. Not as a ship slows when the wind fails, gradually, with a soft sagging of canvas. This was abrupt, like running into a bank of thick weed. The bow dipped. The timbers creaked protest. "We have no soundings," Garran muttered, fumbling for the line anyway. "There should be no sandbar here. The charts." "There is no sandbar," Daenerys said. She stepped forward, bracing one hand on the forestay as the ship's motion changed. The air ahead of the bow had taken on a peculiar quality, like air above a hot road at midday. It shimmered, wavered, bending the smoky vista beyond into strange, warped shapes. She squinted. There, just at the very edge of perception, was a line. Not a visible wall, not exactly, but a place where light shifted wrong, where the eye slid off if it tried to fix on it. "A ward," she whispered. Kinvara spoke of it. Spells woven to hold back the worst of the doom, or to hold something in. The dragons did not like it. Drogon hovered just short of the shimmering place, wings beating harder than they should have needed to. He snarled low, his teeth bared, eyes narrowed to slits. Rhaegal and Viserion circled warily, keeping a distance, their necks craned, nostrils flaring. Daenerys felt a pressure in her sinuses, a ringing in her ears like the aftermath of a loud sound. Her skin crawled. "Back water?" Garran asked, voice thin. Sweat dripped from his chin. "We must turn away, your grace. This is sorcery. Old sorcery. It is not meant for us." "It was meant for someone," she said, "and someone meant it to endure." Her heart pounded. She thought of her dream. The girl on the balcony, the great dragon at the base of the citadel, murmuring about those who were not taken. She thought of the runes on her dagger, of the whisper she had felt every time she touched it. Without giving herself time to think, she drew the blade. The moment steel cleared leather, the pressure in the air sharpened. The shimmering line ahead pulsed faintly, once, as if in response. The dagger felt almost warm in her hand now, its rippling surface alive with faint, shifting reflections. Blood, flame, remembrance, those who were not taken. She stepped onto the very tip of the bow, where only a low railing separated her from the hissing sea. The Stormdancer quivered beneath her, as if straining against some invisible restraint. Men shouted behind her. Yora's voice rose above them all. "Daenerys, be careful. If the ward recognizes anything," she said, "it will be this. Valyrian steel forged before the doom. Blood of dragonlords in its making. And in mine." She lifted the dagger. The unseen line loomed closer, though it had no substance. When she reached out with her other hand, fingers extended, she felt nothing but air. Yet when the tip of the blade crossed that invisible threshold, the world changed. A sound like a sigh ran through the water and the stone around them, a great exhalation that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The pressure in her ears popped, then faded. The shimmering line brightened, briefly visible as a faint curtain of pale light stretching from sea to sky, then collapsed inward, like silk drawn aside. The Stormdancer surged forward as whatever had been resisting her gave way. Men staggered. The dragons roared, startled. Daenerys lowered the dagger, her arm shaking. The air smelled different now. Less of rot and sulfur, more of rain perhaps, though no rain fell. The hiss of the sea had quieted to a murmur. "Seven, save us," Garran whispered. "What have you done?" "What I came here to do," she said, though her voice trembled. "I knocked on the door." The difference was immediate and profound. Beyond the place where the ward had stood, the water smoothed. The thick, sluggish resistance lessened. The Stormdancer slid forward with new ease, her bow cutting cleanly through a surface now more dark blue than black. Steam still rose from scattered vents, but in thinner plumes, like the breath of some great beast slumbering instead of thrashing. The air grew cooler by a few degrees. Daenerys took a deep breath and did not feel as if she were inhaling oil. The oppressive weight that had lain on her chest lightened. Even the sky looked different. Still clouded, but higher, the bruised colors fading to a softer gray shot with hints of pale blue. And there were buildings. Not the broken teeth of towers half-melted and drowned that she had seen before, but structures still standing proud against the horizon. Slender spires of pale stone rose from rocky outcrops, some linked by delicate bridges that looked too narrow for carts, perhaps meant only for foot or dragon wing. Aqueducts arched from one jagged cliff to another, carrying streams of water that glimmered like quicksilver. On the nearest shore, a series of terraces climbed from the waterline, cut into the rock in broad, even steps. Each was lined with what might once have been mooring posts or pylons. Some still held the rusted remnants of chains as thick as a man's torso. Above these, carved directly into the cliff face, were more dragon heads, less melted here, their eyes picked out in what might once have been inlaid gemstones. "This cannot be," Yora said under his breath. Awe and unease warred in his voice. The doom was 300 years ago. No city could endure that and remain so whole. "No city of men," Garran muttered. His knuckles were white again, but this time from something more complex than fear alone. "We have sailed into the throat of a god." Daenerys could not answer. Her tongue felt thick. She had seen grand cities in her life. Pentos with its painted towers, Karth with its walls of jade and lapis, Meereen with its pyramids. But this was something else. Something older, stranger. And this, she knew instinctively, was only the outermost edge of whatever enclave had survived. Her gaze was pulled inexorably to the west. There, rising above the lesser spires and terraces, stood a citadel. It was not the sprawling, many-towered monstrosity from her dream, but it was kin to it. A great hall of white stone perched on a black promontory, its broad front facing the inner sea. Tall windows marched along its length, their glass long gone, leaving empty arches. Two narrower towers flanked it, their tops conical and sharply pointed. A balcony jutted from the central third, like a tongue. Pale banners snapped there, though at this distance she could not see their sigil. She swayed. For a heartbeat the dream overlaid the reality. The city unbroken, skies streaked violet, dragons wheeling in full daylight. Then the vision flickered and was gone, leaving only the strange, half-restored remnant amid a world of ruin. "The hall," Garran whispered. His voice trembled. "Gods help me, that is the hall I saw, or its twin." But it was not so whole before. The balcony was cracked, the right-hand tower broken. He scrubbed at his eyes as if to clear them. "Either my memory is a drunkard, or they have rebuilt it since." Daenerys's heart hammered. Rebuilt. Someone lived here. She looked up. The dragons flew more easily now, their earlier agitation smoothing out. Drogon glided on locked wings, his long tail trailing. Rhaegal and Viserion banked and dove playful again. They had passed into a sky that welcomed them. "The ward was not meant to keep everything out," she said softly. "Only the worst storms. The doom's direct touch. It shelters this place like a shell, and imprisons whoever dwells here inside it," Yora added. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps they control it from within." Either way, they chose to stay. The thought unsettled her more than she had expected. Leaving had been hard enough. Her ancestors had abandoned a burning world to claw out a smaller life on a cold, storm-lashed rock. But choosing to remain in the heart of the wound itself, to fortify and rebuild atop the scar, what kind of mind made that choice? "Signal the other ships," she ordered. "Tell them to follow at a distance. We go on." From the height of Drogon's back, the hidden world unfolded in unexpected detail. Daenerys clung to the ridge of his neck, legs locked around his shoulders, as he rose above the Stormdancer with a few mighty beats. The wind-up here was different, cooler, cleaner, carrying scents of stone, steam, and something metallic, like the tang of a forge. Below, the ship looked small, a dark toy against the strangely placid water. She had not intended to mount him so soon. Some cautious part of her had wanted to stay aboard, to approach as other men did with wood and sail. But as the citadel loomed closer, an itch had grown between her shoulder blades, a sense that if she did not meet whatever waited here from the sky, on Dragonback, she would be less. This place was meant to be seen from above. From this vantage, the terraces below the White Hall resolved into more than abstract shapes. She saw ramps leading down into tunnels big enough for dragons, their entrances ringed with iron that had not rusted. Smaller buildings clustered near the waterline, squat, windowless structures that might be forges or warehouses. Smoke rose from some of them, not the wild steam of volcanic vents, but the straight, patient columns of controlled fire. People moved there, tiny figures from this height, but people nonetheless going about tasks as in any city. Her breath caught. "They live," she whispered into Drogon's scales. "They truly live." Further up, along the cliff's edge leading to the citadel, she saw more movement. Men and women gathered along a carved parapet, their robes dark, black, red, deep blue. Even from here, the sun caught glints of silver in their hair, in streaks or full manes. A bell tolled somewhere, a clear, bright sound that carried oddly well across the water. Drogon's head swung toward the citadel. He rumbled, low and curious. As if in answer, something moved behind the hall. 3 shapes rose into view, swift and smooth. Dragons, smaller than Drogon but unquestionably his kin. One was a sleek, narrow beast with scales the color of polished steel and wing membranes edged in darker gray. Another was bronze green, its body modeled like old armor. The third was deep crimson, its belly a shade lighter than its back, as if lit from within. Riders clung to their necks. They wore close-fitting leathers and mail that gleamed faintly, with harnesses worked in patterns Daenerys could not quite make out. Their hair streamed behind them as they urged their mounts into arcs that brought them out over the inner sea. They were coming to meet her. Drogon's muscles bunched in preparation for something. A challenge, perhaps. A dance or a fight. Daenerys laid a hand flat on his neck, feeling the heat there, the tension. "Easy," she murmured. "Not yet. Not until we see." The other dragons fanned out, taking a loose triangle formation. The steel-colored one came to the fore, its wings beating a measured rhythm. Its rider sat very straight, one hand resting on a pommel shaped like a dragon's head. As they drew nearer, Daenerys saw his face. Pale, fine-boned, beardless, perhaps 40 years of age. His hair was white, cut to his shoulders, with a single thin braid bound in a ring of red metal. His eyes, she could not yet see their color, but they were sharp, fixed on her. Below, on the Stormdancer's deck, men pointed upward, exclaiming. Yora shaded his eyes with one hand. Dario stood with his hands on his hips, grinning like a boy at a tourney. The steel-colored dragon slowed as it approached Drogon, matching his altitude and distance with uncanny precision. The other 2 flanked their leader, their riders' gazes raking over Daenerys' form, her pale hair, her dragons. For a heartbeat, there was only the thunder of wings and the rush of air. Valyrian blood gazed upon Valyrian blood across a gap of perhaps 30 yards and 300 years. Then the leading rider raised his hand in a gesture that was both greeting and challenge. Fingers splayed, palm outward, thumb bent slightly inward. Daenerys had never seen it before, and yet somehow she knew it. Her throat felt tight. Slowly, she lifted her own hand and mirrored the gesture. The man's mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. He called something out in High Valyrian, his voice carrying easily across the gap, pure and unbroken in a dialect that made her sound soft and provincial. "Daughter of Enar's lost line," he said, "welcome to what remains of your home."